The Electoral Integrity Report Worldwide of 2019, produced by the Department of Government and International Relations, University of Sydney, points out that the biggest number of countries in the world with elections that have either low or very low integrity are in Africa. The reasons for this include, among others, corruption in kleptocratic regimes ruled by clientelism, contests disrupted by outbreaks of violence, state repression of opposition parties and candidates, blatant violation of fundamental human rights, and civil conflicts, among others. Thus, election outcomes have often been contested or challenged on grounds of integrity deficits. The quality of elections has been one of the recurrent trigger points for coup d'etats, like it was the case in Mali's 2020 elections and the unsuccessful coup in Niger after elections of 2021, among others. In countries like Kenya and Malawi, the Supreme Court nullified presidential elections on grounds of integrity deficits. One way to achieve electoral integrity is to have an open, transparent, and accountable electoral process, and access to information is at the root of the aforementioned parameters. The failure by relevant electoral stakeholders to proactively disclose information breeds distrust, dissatisfaction, or disinterest, at worst, violence, ineffective governance, and long-term instability. Both misinformation and disinformation campaigns pose a threat to the integrity of elections. This and much more in today's episode of the webinar series.
A very good afternoon. It's afternoon back here in Uganda. So it's a very good afternoon to all our dear listeners and viewers and participants. I think it's also afternoon in across in Kenya, in our neighborhood. I think the East African GMT time, we are sharing the same time zone. And allow me to welcome everybody who is joining us for our monthly webinar series. And this time we look at access to information and electoral integrity in Africa. Your host, Felix Kafuma, I will be taking you through this show. And before we start, allow me to welcome our dear listeners and viewers out there to subscribe to our social media platforms to be able to get the notifications, especially when we are running this monthly webinar series. We are live on Facebook, live on Twitter, and also live on YouTube. You're able to flash below the screen. You're able to flash our YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter accounts so that you can be part of the discussion. Your host, Felix Kafuma, and with me, I have a panel of 5 participants from across the region, and I'll be introducing them in a short while. But before I introduce them, let me do some bit of house cleaning to give this discussion direction. We will be having, I'll be providing an introduction to the panelists, and that will take me about 5 minutes. And then I'll be giving each panelist about 5 minutes to respond to a question, 1 or 2, before we kind of like open it up to a random Q&A, depending on how the discussion progresses. And then we shall be having a plenary and Q&A combined, and then we shall wrap it up. So we are here for the next 2 hours. Fasten your seatbelts and let's enjoy this discussion. With me, today with me as a panelist, I have a gentleman from Ghana, a gentleman from Zambia, a gentleman from Tanzania, a lady from Kenya, and also a gentleman from Uganda. So it's a male-dominated panel, but yes, the weight of the lady from Kenya makes up for the numbers. And let me start by introducing the gentleman from Ghana, is none other than Dr. Kojo Asante. Dr. Kojo Asante is the current Director of Advocacy and Policy Engagement at CDD Ghana. Ghana is Center for Democratic Development, and it's an independent and non-profit research and advocacy think tank that is working mainly to promote democracy, good governance, and inclusive economic growth in Ghana. Dr. Kojo Asante is a legal policy and governance specialist, especially in areas of constitutional governance, electoral integrity, with depth of knowledge and experience in addressing monetization of politics and illicit financing of elections. Dr. Kojo has over 17 years of experience in watching and reforming elections in Ghana and in Africa. He has led the coalition of domestic election observers, CODEO, in Ghana, 2008, 2016, and 2020 elections. He's a PhD holder in development policy and management from the University of Manchester, UK. He also has a master's in African studies from the State University of New York. He's also he's a land friend. He's a lawyer. He's a member of the Ghana Bar Association. He's a trained barrister. He's also the Bar of England and Wales, and also is the Honourable Society of Gray's Inn in England. He currently serves as the chair of the Right to Information Coalition, which is a multi-member CSO platform dedicated to promote and effective implementation of the RTI Act in Ghana. It's very good to have you, Dr. Kojo, on today's edition of the monthly webinar series. You're most welcome. I proceed to the next. I proceed to the next panelist. The next panelist is none other than Peter Mwanangombe from Zambia. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Peter is an elections expert with a wealth of experience on elections and electoral processes in Zambia. He's currently the program manager for the Christian Churches Monitoring Group, CCMG. Peter has worked in elections in Zambia, the 2011 elections, the 2016 elections, where he focused on electoral processes, including boundary delimitation monitoring and mobile NRC assurance monitoring, as well as monitoring the parliamentary and local government elections. He's an advocate for human rights, also advocate for electoral democracy and good governance. He co-authored a chapter on civil and political rights in a publication that is dubbed or known as A Revolution Revisited the State of Democracy in Zambia. He's also, he sits on the bloggers, I think the board, the Zambia Board of Trustees for the bloggers. And I think we'll be having a discussion around that as well, because access to information and the role of the bloggers in this case. I am most welcome, Peter, who is from Zambia. It's good to have you on set. Our other participants is Yusuf Wango from Tanzania. Yusuf is the executive director of Tanzania Youth Vision Association. Yusuf has served in the News and Information Committee under the National Electoral Commission of Tanzania, especially during the 2020 elections. You remember Tanzania held its elections at the peak of COVID. Yusuf is a youth that has contributed immensely to shaping youth in Tanzania, establishing youth policy networks like the Activista and the Yusuf Wango from Tanzania. You are most welcome to today's edition of the webinar series. And then let me introduce Henry Kasacha from Uganda. Henry is currently the executive director of Dialogue and Democracy Training Center. He has been supporting democracy and governance work for close to 20 years. Done a lot of work around political economy analysis, gender mainstreaming, deepening democratic processes, and leadership training, including youth programming and engagement. He is the founding program manager of iPod. iPod is the platform that brings together political parties in Uganda to promote dialogue. Henry Kasacha, you are very, very welcome. It's good to have you on set. Then last, and his intention to introduce the lady last, like I said, she's the only lady, but her weight does make up for the numbers. We have Florence Biria, who is the deputy registrar of political parties in Kenya. I think she has been in this position since November 2020, if I'm right, when she was appointed. Yes, she's a Kenyan working as a deputy registrar of political parties. Of the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties in Kenya is abbreviated as ORPP. And this position is critical because in here she does manage the registration and regulation of political parties in Uganda. So Florence has a wealth of experience spanning for over 20 years, having worked in different professional backgrounds. He also worked with the IEBC, that's the Kenya Electoral Commission, as an election official for a couple of years, and then she's also holds the Bachelor of Arts degree in Commerce and the Master's degree in Business Admin. She's a certified public accountant in Kenya, and she's also a member of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Kenya. It's good to have you, Florence, on set with us today. I hope on my set, I'm only seeing 2 participants online. I hope all the others are equally on set, but I'm going to start with Henry to get this off the ground. I'm starting with you, Henry Kasacha of Uganda. And I have no deliberate reason why you first. But I think I should flag you off, especially helping us to set the stage to appreciate and understand why is it significant, or what is the significance of access to information on electoral integrity. When we talk about electoral integrity, we understand what the role access to information does play or contribute. But it's important that you help the viewer out there and set the stage to take us through the significance of access to information on electoral integrity. Take us away. Over to you, Henry.
Microphone is muted. I get a signal that my microphone is muted. I don't know if I can unmute it myself. I think somebody has to unmute my microphone.
I can hear you, Henry. Please proceed.
Oh, okay, thank you very much, and I'm happy to join this panel. And briefly, I would say the significance of access to information is something that cannot be underrated, particularly because elections have been very contested, the results have been disputed, people have lost their lives based on not having the right information, and sometimes based on acting under rumors. So much of the political contests that we see in our country begin on a foundation of mistrust, because to many players, the managers of the elections in our country are not independent, are not transparent, and they think that they are partial, yet they should be impartial. So we go into an election with a lot of mistrust. And in the case of Uganda, for the last 5 or so general elections, each time you go for an election, there is a campaign in the country for electoral reforms. In other words, there is the campaign to ensure that there are some reforms done to enhance the integrity of the elections. So we go into an election amidst failed processes of pushing for reforms. And one of the key reform issues has been the appointment and the constitution of the Electoral Commission, which has been on the table for the last 20 years. So we start on a ground of mistrust, and when we start on a ground of mistrust, even the political players withdraw from cooperation with the Electoral Commission. So a number of efforts that are instituted to provide information, basic information, I would say, have not attracted interest and participation of the political players. And many of them continuously um, conduct their politics based on what information they have. So the access of information becomes a very critical issue. And this it's being critical is that everybody must have access to information that is going to affect the election process. I'll give an example. We are going tech. We are using biometric systems, and very few people have had full information about how the systems can work. And this also begins at a starting point that when you don't give people the right information about the entire electoral process, you create room for doubt, you create room for suspicion, and you create rooms for spillovers. So I would say that it is very fundamental, and I think it is very central that enhancing electoral integrity will begin with access to information. People should know the entire process. People should know how results are going to come in. People should know who is going to tally the results. People should have their questions answered. And all this has to be addressed. Now, in a country like Uganda, where we have had some of these challenges, people have moved on to speculation. And this one is also the speculation is enhanced by a liberalized media, where we have so many media houses, and many of them are reporting hearsay, and hearsay becomes the truth. So at the end of the day, we lose the opportunity of reforming, we lose the opportunity of tracking the exact challenges of the process, and we lose the opportunity for engagement. One of the critical elements that has been lacking is that stakeholder engagement before, during, and after the elections. We have not had forums that build confidence, and this is another big element that comes through information sharing. Unless you build confidence of all the players, unless you build confidence of the police, unless you build confidence of the politicians, the Electoral Commission will continuously be in a combative kind of environment. And this is partly what we have seen across the last general elections. So I would say that it is very significant that without access to information in a process that is highly contested, because a general election is about power. It's not about betting on who is likely to come, and it's about power. So when people believe that they are likely to lose power on grounds that are uncertain, challenges are that we are likely to have violence, and this has been a spillover of these processes. So I would say that access to information is very significant. The biggest challenge is that it has not been embraced by many office bearers. Many people believe they can hold on to information. Others believe they cannot release information without being sanctioned. Others have to have a fallback position. So people will withhold information pending approval, pending um, a consent of various players. So this informal influence, which comes with a hybrid kind of transition, is part of the bigger problem. So regardless, even outside elections, the issue of access to information has not yet been embraced, as much as we have a law and people have to account, but the authorities have not embraced access to information as a facilitator and a tool for democracy. So it
All right.
continuously continues towards election processes.
Thank you so much, Henry, for setting the tone of the discussion. And I'm going to come to you, Dr. Kojo, and because looks like the problem of access to information is not unique. It's an African problem. Across, when you look at across most of the African states, there's a challenge around access to information when it comes to electoral processes. And why is it that there is a persistent challenge in Africa when it comes to access to electoral related information? Why is it so predominant in Africa, Doctor?
All right. Good morning from Accra. I hope you can hear me now. think we've been having some network challenges. Felix, can
Yes,
you
we
hear me?
can hear you.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity and for inviting me to participate in this discussion. I think one thing we that has been good that has come out of the pandemic is the ability for us to discuss some of these transnational issues, particularly in Africa, where resource constraints and sometimes even language makes it difficult for us to connect and find solutions to our common problems. So I think this is a laudable initiative, and we should have more of these conversations. So I mean, you talked about why access to information has been a challenge, particularly in Africa, and as it relates to election. In the Ghana case, for instance, it took us almost 2 decades, 20 years, before we finally passed the Right to Information Act in 2019, which guarantees us access to information. And what I liked about the the principles that were affirmed in that act are two. One is proactive disclosure and maximum disclosure. Because when you think about the principles of accountability in a democracy, it's very basic. The officers, public officers who are elected or appointed, are there to serve our needs. They are there to pursue our interests. So essentially, whatever they do, whatever information they collect, in pursuant of that objective, that public interest objective, is for us. So in essence, we really even don't need a framework to come and ask for something that is already ours, right? But of course, uh, the protection of the public interest also has elements that require that we secure information, we manage information in a way that does not undermine the public interest. So there's always a balance in terms of what kinds of information we have to get and so on and so forth. But generally, the reason why our governments, our public institutions and agencies resist the access to information is because of their unwillingness to accept the general democratic principle that they work for somebody else and not for their own interest. And because we built a culture, sometimes whether it's come from dictatorships, it's come from just having a culture of opacity in public services and so on, we extend all these processes to elections with very devastating consequences for a lot of countries. So we have already mentioned that right from the beginning, you are talking about election being a low trust environment. Everybody is skeptical about the electoral management body, all the agencies, the public, the police, all kinds of people, because the stakes are very, very high. And therefore, it becomes almost imperative that right from the beginning, and that beginning in an election period, sometimes we focus solely on election day or immediate, election day period. We forget that even the periods of the manifesto, how we present a program to convince the citizens that one party is the one that should be elected, that the information that needs to be provided there is also critical if you want to promote issue-based elections. So there is a lot of that process that we have not, unfortunately, embraced. But I believe that is changing because the citizens are also demanding that they should have more information about these things, and increasingly, government has to react. I mean, a framework like what we have in Ghana should help, but there's still a long way to go in trying to make sure that processes become part of the public culture, so that we don't even need to ask. We are already giving that information, as a matter of right, so that we are informed and are able to participate more effectively in making sure we have credible elections and we have peaceful elections.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kojo, for that. I don't know whether I have Florence on call, because yes, Florence, you are there. Uh, I wanted you to help us here understand, given the kind of work you do. We looked across and we found that when it comes to islands of integrity within political parties, especially when it comes to political parties to volunteer information, disclose information across Africa, we struggle to find out which political party is actually fulfilling the requirements, ticking the box. And many of them have to be compelled either by law or a policy provision that they should disclose information. And as a person who has worked with the IEBC of Kenya, you've worked with political parties as well, in one way or another. Why is it so difficult to find political parties that are comfortable to disclose information on returns, for example, on their campaign income, how much they're spending? Why must they always be compelled to disclose information? Across Africa is a problem.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Here in Kenya, it is 2:30 p.m. and I'm glad to join this panel and to also contribute in this very important and a critical topic, especially for us here in Kenya at a time like this, when we are at the tail end of preparing and gearing up for the general elections coming on August 9th this year. Indeed, it's a pleasure to represent my country and also to represent my organization, the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties in Kenya. I know the principal invitee was for the registrar, but due to some other exigencies of work, she could not join in. But I believe I'll be able to ably represent her and also ably handle the task and also the subject in our hands and before us this afternoon. My name is Florence Biria, the Deputy Registrar at the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties in Kenya. Now, as you know, our primary mandate as an office, which I've alluded to when you are introducing me, is to register and regulate political parties, as well as to administer the Political Parties Fund in Kenya. In the Constitution of Kenya 2010 actually introduced the Political Parties Fund, and therefore in the Political Parties Act, which is our mother act as an institution, we also include provision for the administration, allocation, distribution, and accountability for the fund. Now, when we're talking of electoral processes, we cannot talk of electoral processes in Kenya, and especially elections, without touching on political parties. Majority of our candidates in most of the elections are drawn from political parties. Actually, producing candidates for an election is one of the roles and functions of political parties in Kenya as prescribed in the Political Parties Act. So when we're talking about an election, we cannot talk about access to information during an election without touching on political parties. We cannot talk of electoral integrity without touching on political parties, because political parties in Kenya are majorly the homes of most of the candidates that find themselves in the ballot papers for Kenyans to make a decision as to who should become their leader. Now, when you talk of information, actually information is one of the resources that every institution has in as far as implementing their strategies is concerned. So it becomes a strategic factor. That's why it's important to have laws that govern how these institutions avail information in terms of what kind of information needs to be availed and to who and how, so that it is accessible to those who need it and it is available whenever needed, and therefore it can be used for making informed decisions and choices by the citizenry of the country. In Kenya, we have a constitution, and within the constitution, we have a section on bills of rights and freedoms. And in there, we have a provision, which is a provision under Article 35 of the Constitution of Kenya, which provides for access to information. Because information is so critical, it cannot be left to institutions to voluntarily avail it. Because if that becomes the case, then you will have either over disclosure, which is not a problem, but also a disclosure, which now becomes a problem because there is very critical information that is needed, or which the country or the citizenry needs, that is not being availed, which can easily be misconstrued to mean that it has been withheld. It can be construed that there is lack of transparency because it has not been availed. But I think it's very important for the framework to be clearly defined, that this kind of information should be availed. And that is the approach we have actually taken, even in giving effect of that article of the Constitution in Kenya. That in most of these institutions, especially public institutions, and particularly the ones that are established by an act of parliament, then there is a provision in every act of parliament on how information held or in the hands of these institutions can be availed, can be accessed by the members of public, to what extent, and also what then somebody needs to do to access this information. So that then not everybody walks in and comes to ask, who is Florence Biria? For example, who is he married to? How many children does he have? Where do they go to school? You know, because that information can also end up in the hands of the wrong people and can be abused. For example, if it ends up in the hands of terrorists, what do you think will happen to me or to my children at a time like this? You know? So setting the boundaries and the parameters for us has worked very well. Of course, we are still in the journey. We are not yet there, but I think it has enabled, one, the institution to be able to tell what kind of information they need to give periodically, during which season, to who, and in which format, number one. And also number two, it has enabled the public to know what kind of information can we demand, because you cannot just demand for any information. What kind of information can we demand? And if I need to make this demand, then what do I need to do? Is there a fee I need to pay so that I prepare for that fee in advance, such that it does not become an ambush and therefore misconstrued to be a deterrent from that applicant who wants to get the information that they are being denied the information through a levy? In saying so, for example, political parties are required to file certain returns. Now, when we say they are required to file certain returns, for example, it is in the whole spirit of making sure that they avail information. Because when these returns are filed, the returns are public. So this information therefore becomes public. For instance, if a political party holds a meeting and they make a decision, for example, they elect and therefore change their leadership, then they're supposed to file a return and saying, on this day, we had this meeting of this organ, and these are the people who attended, and this is the resolution that was passed. Number one. So they must do that. Number two, they must publish that information in a gazette or in a newspaper of nationwide circulation, and also post it in their website. And the website are accessible by everybody. So when it is put in the newspapers, then it is public information. Even though there are some people, even if you put that information in the newspapers, they'll still not read it. They say in Africa, if you want to hide information, put it in a book. Yeah, and they will not see it. Of course, it's not for everybody, but then it speaks generally. So even when it is in the newspapers, people will still, or citizens will still complain that we didn't know that, the leadership of these parties, for example, had changed because they expected to be called for a baraza to be told from one location to the other. So it's very important also, even for those who are targeted with that information, to be proactive. Look for it, get that information. But what does information do? Even to those who receive the information in terms of these electoral processes. Then it enables the participants or the users of this information to effectively engage with the duty bearers. Like, for example, the moment we changed, because we had an amendment of the Political Parties Act the other day, this year actually, around January, February. So when the amendment came into force, then you were able to sensitize various groups and classifications of Kenyans, ranging from the political parties themselves, civil society organizations, faith-based organizations, government employees, and many, the media, and so on and so forth. So we were able to sensitize them, and the moment they were sensitized, then they became aware, and they were able to effectively engage with this office, because now they knew this is the new regulatory framework that is in place. Then they're able to regulate, they're able to ask questions, then they're able to hold those institutions accountable, because they know you are supposed to be doing this at this particular time. A case in point, you'll be able to recall, if you are following the discussion immediately after the amendment of the Act, was that will the registrar really be able to certify the register of members of all political parties within the time frame given of 7 days? Why were they able to ask that? Because we had sensitized them that upon application for a certified register by a party, the office of the registrar will have 7 days to avail that certified register to the political party for their use towards preparation for the elections. So because they were aware, they were able to constantly ask questions, including going to the national televisions and ask, how will the registrar be able to do this? And we had to come out and explain to the public that we have put in place mechanisms. And these are the mechanisms we have put in place. They even asked, then how will you ensure there's control and that you can ascertain parties are using the register you have certified and not a different register, putting your register under the table and using their own register. So we had to explain that we'll even put security features that our officers can be able to identify the register that is being used is our own register. So it really helps, actually, from my experience and from the experience of this office, access to information to the public, disclosure of information really even helps you to improve in your own operational processes, in your own procedures, and in your own plans towards giving that efficient and quality service to your customers. Now, the other thing I would want to mention also with regard
as you conclude, yes, proceed.
Yes, as I conclude, thank you. As I conclude, thank you. When there is information available, yeah, then when there's more transparency, rather, yeah, then information flows, and then even the need to hide that information ceases, because when you hide one piece of information, you need to hide another one. But what I can say is that information also is part and parcel of the competitive advantage that even politicians and political parties have. Remember, elections is a competition. So if it is not required, then why should I disclose everything and remain with no competitive advantage? So then the requirement. And in as far as the integrity is concerned, I don't think it should be just open and saying, if you don't disclose as much as the other, then you are not operating with integrity. It should be, if you're not disclosing what has been prescribed and required, then it becomes an issue of integrity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Florence. I'll come back to you. I think on the case one of Kenya, that very very when the court annulled the elections, and some of the reasons they advanced for annulling that election was that I think to do with the transmission of electoral results. I think there was an issue there. We shall come back to that as well. But let me come to you, Yusuf, from Tanzania. As a youth, and I know Africa is is a youthful continent. This is their time. What kind of information should be relevant or is relevant during an electoral process that ideally should be availed to inform the participation of youths in an
Thank you
election?
so much, Felix.
Yes, Yusuf, proceed. Yusuf, proceed. I think Yusuf is having a connection problem. Okay, Yusuf is having a connection problem. Yes, Henry, I'll bring you in to have a bite on Flores's submission around political parties' disclosure of information. But before I bring you in on that discussion, I don't know whether is Peter on call from Zambia? Okay, I think also I don't have Peter on call. Could be a connection problem. Henry, you wanted to have a bite on Florence's submission. Please proceed.
You can hear me now?
Yes, please proceed.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that one of the challenges that political parties are going through that makes them very, very cagey on disclosing information are basically two folds. Number one, many of the political players are not democratic. They are not transparent. They lack that culture of democracy. And they do not believe that access to information is something they should practice even when they are outside government. So that's the first problem that we face. The second problem is that the nature of our political environment is sometimes extremely difficult for political parties to disclose all the information they get, particularly information about who supports them and how much money they got and from where they got that money. So these two factors, in the case of Uganda, I have interacted with many political players. Sometimes they have support from people who do not want to be associated with supporting political parties. So it's always backdoor support, it's always disguised support. In many cases, it's not very transparent, particularly because of the political context, where anybody who supports a political party would be labeled and will be fought as an enemy. So that is also another challenge they face. But fundamentally, it's because of lack of accountability, lack of transparency within the culture. It's a deficit of the culture, of that democratic culture that will allow accountability. So those two factors make it extremely difficult. Many political parties still want to do so many things behind the door. And they do this outside government, and chances are that they will do it inside government. Secondly, the fact that the environment has not yet transited to a democratic environment. Supporting an opposition political party in some cases is extremely very difficult. So many people would wish to make donations, but they do not want to declare these donations. So a party has to find ways of faulting on accounting and acknowledging where this money came from. So those two factors are the biggest challenges why political parties are not accounting and why political
Thank you.
parties are not giving information they should be giving.
Thank you so much, Henry, on weighing in on that matter. And now I wish that we had Peter from Zambia, because Uganda's case is a bit similar to Zambia's case when it comes to political parties disclosing information and the challenges around that. But before Henry weighed in on the submission from Florence, I had Yusuf on call, who I kind of like had a problem with the network. I think now we have Yusuf. Yusuf, can you proceed? Because if you remember the question, it was more about what kind of information is relevant during an electoral process, especially for the youth. Unmute, please.
Okay, thank you so much, Felix, and the rest of the group for the platform to share the youth issues specific on the electoral process and the electoral integrity. As communicated, my name is Yusuf Bwango. I'm working with the Tanzania Provision Association. Back to your question, what kind of information do young people want, specifically during the electoral processes? There is this saying which is always says like this: there is no us without us. As you traced back on your introduction when you introduced me, you spoke about the majority of our African population to be of our young people. So that means during the electoral processes or outside the electoral processes, what youth want to hear is their issues and demands are being addressed throughout the election process. And this is why, if you, of course, you all know the platforms whereby the candidates are getting throughout the election process, specifically during the election campaigns. The candidate who is always speaking youth issues, the candidate who is speaking from the heart of young people here in Africa is the candidate who is going to be mostly likely to win the election. So that means young people in Africa, not only in Africa, all over the world, during the electoral processes, what we want to hear is our issues. We want to hear the best solutions of young people's problems and challenges in Africa and all over the world. So on the basis of your question, of course, what young people wants to hear during the electoral processes is the candidates who always speaks the issues of young people and how can the challenge of young people being addressed over the coming regime of a particular election. So in a nutshell, young people want to see or want to hear their issues and demands are being addressed. So that's one among the key information that we want to hear during the election. Not only that, but also it's not only that, but also young people wants to be aware. For instance, what candidate is speaking on what kind of issues. Not only that, but also the issues about the civic spaces. Not only that, but also the issues of electoral campaign. So, in a nutshell, young people wants to hear the issues and demands are being addressed during the electoral processes. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Yusuf. I don't know whether I have doctor on call because I want to bring in doctor here. We have doctor on call. Looks like we don't have doctor on call, so I'll come back to Flores until doctor comes. Okay, doctor is there. Doctor, looking at, I think, and I also weigh in here the submission of Flores. But let me first help us understand this from the perspective of Africa as a continent. Is the notion of electoral integrity an alien issue to Africa? Because most of our elections fall short on fulfilling the minimum requirements to be passed as elections with a bit of integrity. But is this something Africa is grappling with because it's an alien, it's a foreign concept? What's your take, Doctor?
Hello, Felix. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Proceed. Proceed, Doctor. Doctor, can you hear us? Okay, I think Doctor has a connection problem. If I can have Doctor back on set, I'll revisit that question. But now, like I promised, I think it's a question where I would want Florence to weigh in. You remember, like I told you earlier, the famous court annulment of that election. One of the things that was raised was around the results, the way the results were being transmitted. And help us weigh in here is the issue of electoral integrity. Also looking at technology, because I think Kenya, you've gone dig it on this. But as a concept, is it a challenge? Is it a challenge to Africa?
Thank you so much. I think those who spoke earlier, I think it's Daktari who alluded to the fact that COVID, among other things, even though it brought a lot of challenges, it also brought in a lot of new things and new ways of doing business, and therefore re-engineering many ways of doing business, including increasing our level of research. We've been pushed out of our comfort zone, and therefore there are things we have realized we can do. And I think this issue of adopting technology, even in conducting elections and transmission of results, for sure, anything that is less than about 10 years old in Africa is very young. And I'll keep telling you that our institution is very young because it's about 7 years old. So at then that infancy stage, there are many challenges, including the fact that we were not even able to develop our own technology. I can tell you today, our institutions have strengthened capacities. A lot of the systems that we use in our institutions now are our own developed technology. That means if there is a hitch, we can deal with it. We do not have to fly somebody from India, from Dubai to come and fix it for us. Because those were some of the challenges, actually, because if a Kim's kit developed a problem, then who would come and fix it? It has to be the supplier. It has to be the support mechanism, which is located miles and miles away from where the elections are taking place. So a lot of reforms have happened around that place where the elections were actually nullified. If we looked at what was happening, then it's very important to appreciate, even from the Kenyans' perspective and context, because you will see a whole change from the way things will be. Because then the results, I remember when I was a returning officer, we used to take the results and key in. You have a phone and the results are written on a piece of paper, and then you transfer, you key into a phone. Now, what you are sending really may not be the results. That is not the primary source, because the primary source is somewhere else. Then you are keying in. Yeah. So we are just trusting the integrity of the agents for the political parties and the politicians participating there, because the results are somewhere else, and then you are keying into the phone something else. You get. So that was the whole thing. Then where are the results? Is it the results in the phone? Is it the results on the paper? Or what is it? Because this could mean totally different things altogether. And where it could not be confirmed for sure that what was on paper is what went into the phone, then that also could bring some challenges. Definitely some of the issues were out of mistrust, but some of them, there could be genuine human question marks. So now the system has been changed such that if it is about tallying, then the tallying, the entering of the results is being done online, so that it is not done somewhere else and then put in the phone, but it is done in the phone, and then once confirmed, then it is transferred to the paper. So I think that is a totally different thing. For those who will be coming to do the observation, I think you have something new to learn so that you can better observe the elections, because there are few changes just to making sure that the system is more effective, and any of those gaps, whether real gaps or perceived gaps, perception is as good as the reality. So we did not pick that as the duty bearers, because this office is one of the duty bearers. As the duty bearers, we did not pick that negatively, but we picked it as an observed gap by a third party for us to strengthen, the process. And that gap has since been breached, and that particular process has been strengthened. And I believe that going forward, I don't think it will be another cause of a challenged election at whatever level. All elections are supposed to be credible, irrespective of whether they're at the council level or at the presidential level. Every election produces a leader, and every leader must be produced through a credible process, because they are all going to perform legislative roles. Thank you, Felix, unless I did not comprehensively address that question.
No, you've done justice, and I think I love the development. It seems like Kenya, you've learned from the past and you're improving in that area. Indeed, we are following the elections in Kenya keenly, and we'll be looking out for that, and especially on how now you've moved on past the technological challenges that happened then that led to the
Yes.
famous annulment. But let me come to, I don't know whether I can have Doctor on set, but if I don't have Doctor, let me come back to Henry, then I'll come to Yusuf. Henry, there is this growing information blackout during elections, especially on social media platforms. The seems to be the norm and the practice by governments to suspend social media and all these other platforms during elections. What is explaining this growing practice?
Well, I think that this practice is explained by how we have embraced social media and how we have decided to use these tools. Definitely, it is a violation of people's rights to information, but in these countries, when there is a lot of information flowing around for various reasons, it can lead to various consequences. So I would look at it from a context of how we have embraced social media, how we have used these platforms um, in the ordinary life and in the ordinary political work. Now, in a country where social media has been used to extensively pass on information, much of that could be falsehoods which have a potential of leading to various consequences as a country. The authorities in this part of the world have been keen to try and prevent that kind of situation, where we have seen that, in particular in Uganda, the argument has been, unfortunately, these arguments have not been dealt with to the bottom of it. The allegation that social media has been used to propagate wrong information, particularly to incite and mobilize the country into riotous kind of behavior, which may be extremely difficult for the security forces to contain. So, when you have tools like social media, which can have a very wide usage and impact, the fact that we do not use them the best democratic way, it gives way for security aid forces and agencies to tend to argue as a preemptive measure that they are trying to contain and they are trying to stop a likely riotous kind of situation. So what we are seeing as a fallback position on the social media and blacking out of internet and what have you has largely been informed with how these tools have been used to cause change elsewhere and how these tools are being embraced in Uganda. So, by and large, the social media has been embraced, but to a very limited extent to advance the policy positions of the various political parties. Many political players have not used social media particularly to advance their positions, to campaign, to reach out, to explain themselves. We have seen so much abuse on the social media, which to me has given a leeway for governments to try and have a preemptive approach towards what may likely to come up. So if they believe that the social media is being used to mobilize the entire country to stand up and run over the entire state system, which is possible, and which capacity they know they cannot contain, they choose to switch it off and switch it on at a later date. It has a big impact because it undermines our democratic growth. It takes away the right to information, which we have. But this is the catch 22 we are in as a country, in a transition to a democracy. Many of these tools can lead to various consequences, and when you do not use them well, chances are that others can abuse their power to go overboard and tend to limit social media. So I think basically that is why we are seeing it. The fact that Social media has played a big role in changing governments elsewhere, in mobilizing mass protests and uprisings. Is not being taken lightly by some of our countries. So they take it up seriously, and they think that some people may choose to promote the usage of social media purposely to ensure that they can have a situation, especially in a country where people believe that it is a hybrid regime, that it cannot change through an election and it can only change through an uprising. So if there is analysis in a particular country that elections do not matter, that no matter what people say, the electoral commission will announce what they want, and the government will, of the day will call the day. There has been an opinion that what we need is an uprising that can run against the establishment. And if social media can support that kind of position, then they embrace social media. So even on the part of governments, they have been looking at that as a potential threat towards being overrun. And I think that is the context under which we are looking at this internet blackout.
Thank you so much, Henry. I'm glad I have Peter on call. Peter, I'm going to come back to you. Let me first throw in Kojo here, Dr. Kojo, before I go to Yusuf, and then I'll give Peter some time also to weigh in on some of the discussions. Doctor, when you look at the across Africa, we've seen a couple of coups as a result of contested election results. We've seen some of the coups have been unsuccessful. We've also seen court annul elections in a few cases of Kenya and Malawi. Again, pointing to integrity deficits. In other countries, we probably would not take the path of annulling, but there are petitions, again, that speak to the deficits in the integrity of elections. Why is it? Why is this notional concept of electoral integrity a problem to Africa? Is it a foreign issue that we are contending with?
So before I answer that, there was a point that Madam Florence made, which I wanted to come back to. I think, I mean, she brought in a perspective about regulatory bodies and why they need their information to be specific, why they need a framework for ensuring that there are very specific rules as to what kinds of information should be released. And I take that. I think because elections and for regulatory bodies, elections are rule-based. You can be taken to court if you don't satisfy certain rules and steps that maybe a candidate has to follow to access a certain type of information. So I can appreciate that. But I think it is important to understand that whatever the context in terms of what the institution is, what it is set up to do, all these requirements basically provides a floor and not a ceiling in terms of how much information you need to provide. The overriding principle has to always drive the responsibility of public agencies to provide information, because sunshine, as they say, is the best disinfectant. So any information that will enhance and promote a trust environment for elections to be carried on, I think it's important. It has to be done. You talked about this issues around election disputes. Sometimes it goes to court, sometimes it leads to the overthrow of constitutional government. There are areas around election information that's always been challenging. That has to do with the collation process and the election announcement process. And two things have driven or made it more complex: technology and, of course, the advent of social media. That process of communicating the collation of the results and the results itself has become more complex. You have parallel processes that are unfolding around these events. So now the parties have the technology to basically get almost real life data on what has been declared at the polling station level, and are able to aggregate that information almost in hours, right? The media has the same capability and the same capacity to deploy enough media people to collate this information. So often, by the time the EC or the electoral management body is going through a long process of collating these processes, following the rules, because as I said, elections is rule-based. The information is already out there as to who is winning or who has won. And now the EMB is now trying to catch up. And in between that process of reconciling the information from the officially recognized body, there's a lot of misinformation that goes on. So it's really about EMBs looking at their processes. How do they also use technology combined with the principles of ensuring that these processes are sound, they have cross-checked the figures and so on and so forth, and announced it to the public's satisfaction. They also need to embrace technology if this is going to work. So I think we are in a territory now that it's important that EMBs, look at the rights, and it's a right that the media has. They are not declaring; they don't have the right to declare elections, but they have the capacity to share that information, and very quickly. And the interested parties also have the capacity, and they are willing to put it out there. So that's an area that we have to look at. On the issue of social media, which was one of our colleagues, I think it was Henry, that was talking about it just now. You see, we have to find a balance between the security risk issues and the developmental advantage and the access to information and engagement that social media and technology provides. Because this is a low cost platform for engaging on many different issues in an election period. And I did mention, for example, that it's not even just the electoral process, as in organizing the election. The process of choosing who should rule or who should govern requires a lot of information sharing as to policies and programs, performance, and this goes on for almost a year. So I think that it's important that we recognize that if we're going to use the platforms positively, we should just find the right balance. In the 2020 election in Ghana, for instance, myself with organization, the Coalition of Domestic Election Observers, together with fact checkers, media houses, the regulatory body for the media organizations, we literally put a blanket on the net to ensure that there is almost real-time fact checking on any kind of misinformation that was put out. So it can be done. It's just that we all have to step up to the responsibility if we want to protect the use of the internet. So I know the dangers of the internet are there, but these are just problems that needs to be solved rather than throwing the baby away with the bathwater.
Thank you so much, Doctor.